This is New Day with Allison Camerata and John Berman.
Good morning and welcome to your new day. Shocking cold, historic cold, wicked cold. They all work. We're talking about life-threatening cold temperatures hitting hundreds of millions of Americans this morning. Some parts of the Midwest could see the coldest weather in decades. It will be colder in Chicago than Antarctica, Alaska, and the North Pole. That's not the way it's supposed to work. The most extreme temperatures will be felt in Minnesota, where wind chills could be 70 degrees below zero. The winter blast is already being blamed for at least 5 deaths.
The deep freeze forcing state governments and schools to close. Airlines have canceled thousands of flights. Amtrak has canceled all trains in and out of Chicago. And the U.S. Postal Service is suspending mail service in at least 10 states. States like Michigan, pounded by heavy snow. Look at your screen. There is lots of reporting of whiteout conditions there. The snow and ice triggering numerous multi-car crashes on highways, as you can imagine. In Minnesota, 193 accidents were reported to the State Patrol in just one day. So CNN's Ryan Young has pulled the short straw in Chicago, where the temperature is 22 degrees below zero. Ryan, tell us what that feels like on your skin.
Unbelievable. You're not even hitting the wind chill factor that we know has now hit 50 below in this area. We're record-setting temperatures so far. The word is going out to make sure that everyone's safe, especially for those who don't have well-insulated homes. There are heating centers open all across this area. Look at the iconic river here in Chicago. It is frozen over. But I can tell you, when this wind hits you, it delivers quite a punch. Nearly 3/4 of the U.S. bracing for bitter cold.
Like I'm going into a freezer.
Digging out as life-threatening low temperatures and ferocious winds grip the Midwest.
It's hard to take a breath in. It's affecting my lungs a little bit.
In Wisconsin, a 55-year-old man found frozen in his garage after authorities say he apparently collapsed while shoveling snow. Slippery roads making travel a nightmare. This dash cam video capturing the treacherous driving conditions in Minnesota, where police say 193 crashes were reported on Tuesday. The wind chill at the Benson, Minnesota airport clocking in at 62 degrees below zero.
It's really, really dangerous out right now.
This 13-vehicle pileup in Michigan bringing the highway to a standstill for hours.
Slow down and leave space between you and the vehicle in front of you and be prepared for whiteout conditions.
In Illinois, giant patches of ice blanketing the Chicago River. Residents insisting they're ready for the deep freeze.
I'm dressed in layers, so I have 2 pairs of pants on.
But as long as I bundle up, have a hat, have a coat, I think I'll be fine.
Dangerously cold air predicted to make temperatures here feel like 50 below.
These conditions are and can be life-threatening. Even short periods of exposure to this type of weather can be dangerous.
Winds also whipping in North Dakota, where it's expected to be negative 20 degrees. Across the nation, airlines canceling thousands of flights because of the deep freeze.
They're putting the de-icer on, and the de-icer froze on the plane.
And for Amtrak customers, all Chicago trains suspended. The flames on these tracks intentional, crews setting them on fire to keep commuter trains going. The weather so cold, the United States Postal Service suspending deliveries in multiple states across the country. Hey, John and Allison, we were actually using the building to kind of shield us. We wanted to come out here on the bridge to show you the power of the Windy City. You can see the flags blowing there. That wind really whips through you. We have several layers on. I think I have 4 or 5 on at this point. So I don't really feel it on the middle part of my body, but on the exposed parts, especially my face, this feels like needles basically hitting your face over and over again. We know that if you're out for even as little as 10 minutes, this could lead to frostbite. So it's something that people should pay attention to. Don't forget, school's been canceled in this area. They're hoping everyone stays inside today. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. So far, the roads have been pretty safe, and they've been moving pretty freely as well.
All right, Ryan. Ryan Young, get inside. Take care of yourself. Take care of the crew. Be careful, everyone. This cold is serious.
Ryan's making me cold in the studio.
Yeah, it's crazy. You see the flags flapping up there?
Yes.
All right, happening now in real time. The president is using his executive time this morning, his 5th day with no public schedule. But what he's doing is he's writing on Twitter, trying to basically make his case. This after his top intelligence chiefs contradicted him on the situation in several of the hot spots all around the world. Listen to what they told Congress.
against ISIS. We've beaten them, and we've beaten them badly.
ISIS is intent on resurging and still commands thousands of fighters in Iraq and Syria.
Chairman Kim, we have a great chemistry, and we're well on our way. You know, we signed an agreement. It said we will begin the immediate denuclearization.
North Korea will seek to retain its WMD capabilities and is unlikely to completely give up its nuclear weapons and production capabilities.
I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be.
Not only have the Russians continued to do it in 2018, but we've seen indication that they're continuing to adapt their model.
All right, joining us now, we have Phil Mudd, former CIA counterterrorism analyst, Samantha Vinograd, former senior aide to the National Security Advisor in the Obama White House, and Joe Lockhart, former Clinton White House press secretary. Great to have all of you. Sam, you're the expert. I want to start with you in terms of, you know, as we know, President Trump decides foreign policy by feeling. He feels he has a good chemistry with Kim Jong-un, therefore Kim Jong-un must be telling the truth. He admires Vladimir Putin, therefore Vladimir Putin must be telling the truth. Peel back the curtain for us. Tell us what goes on in the White House before the national security advisors like that, and the intel chiefs, I should say, come out and deliver an assessment like they did.
Well, I've actually been there when this briefing was presented to the president. There were no surprises from the president's perspective in what the intelligence community chiefs made very public yesterday. Typically, this worldwide threat assessment, which is the coordinated analysis of the 16 members of the intelligence community. This isn't just the director of national intelligence, the CIA director. It is coordinated assessments about what they all believe to be true. This assessment is typically delivered to the president. It's often briefed to him verbally so that he can really plan what his priorities should be for the coming year, and importantly, get a sense of where his policies may or may not be working. That way he can choose where to devote resources and where to change course. North Korea is a perfect example. A responsible president, after getting a briefing like this, would say, my policy on North Korea needs to change. They're not going to denuclearize. What should my goals be realistically on North Korea? Instead of changing his policies on North Korea, the president doubled down by tweet this morning, which really begs the question of where is he getting his intelligence from? If it's not from his own experts, is it from his 2 cents? Is it from television? Or is it from the foreign leaders that he tends to meet with by himself without any note-takers present?
Look, I was going to wait to play this sound, but since you asked the question, where does he get his intelligence?
We have the answer.
We have the answer. You know, it's Lou Dobbs who goes on TV last night and attacks the Director of National Intelligence, the DNI, Dan Coats, for presenting the intelligence that he has discovered and uncovered around the world. Listen to this.
What the hell is wrong with the DNI? He has no political judgment. He has no sense of proportion. I mean, what in hell is he thinking about?
Phil Mudd, your take on Mr. Dobbs there?
Mr. Dobbs, what the hell are you talking about? Let's be clear here. 17 years ago, I was there. The agency, the CIA, said, look, the President of the United States wants us to help the American people understand how bad Saddam Hussein is. I remember the path we took. I understand the reasons we took it. Let's help support the president. 17 years later, I think people of my generation, and for example, Gina Haspel, the CIA director, is from my generation, are looking, saying, look, the president has the right to say we want a new path on places like Russia, Iran, North Korea, but we got to get out and tell the American people, here's what the facts are. If the president or Lou Dobbs wants to say the tooth fairy exists, the intel guys aren't going to say, look, let me explain where the tooth fairy lives. They got to offer the facts, and they did. What's the problem here? You want to relive Iraq again? We're not going to do it.
I mean, so Joe, as Sam just said, the president's been briefed by the intel chiefs, okay?
Right.
So he knows all the, whatever it is, the intel that they've seen, the facts on the ground, the surveillance photos, whatever it is they have. And he is sticking with his gut feeling that Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin must be good guys somehow, and they're telling him the truth. I mean, it's really either woefully naive or, I guess, arrogant that you're just going to stick with your gut feeling.
Yeah, well, it's problematic in one sense to ignore your intelligence chiefs. It's really problematic to make Lou Dobbs the head of your CIA and intelligence operations. The guy has been screaming at the TV for 30 years. Didn't make sense 30 years ago. Doesn't make sense now. It also is problematic but for Trump, I think it's more than about feel. It's about politics. He's trying to create a brand. Remember, it shouldn't be surprising. He stood at the convention and said, only I can solve these problems. Only I. So all of the apparatus of government is useless to him. He's got the idea. The problem is reality is meeting this image that Trump has tried to create. And it's just a very dangerous situation. And yesterday was remarkable. We have gotten numb to the daily drip of, what happens in Washington. To have all of these 16 intelligence agencies to get up there and say, the president is lying to you. They didn't use those words, but they were saying the president lies to you every day. That is remarkable.
They didn't say that. I mean, they really didn't say that. But what Dan Coats did say is that he's not going to have his facts and the intelligence swayed by politics. He did go out of his way to say that, and you can interpret that as you will. Sam, there was another development last night. The Financial Times has a report on what now appears to be a pattern. This has to do with Buenos Aires. The president was in Buenos Aires. Vladimir Putin was there. There was a formal bilateral meeting that was canceled because of Russian activities against Ukraine. But the Financial Times reports that Donald Trump sat down with Vladimir Putin for several minutes of conversation at the end of the evening at the G20 summit in Buenos Aires with no translator or note taker from the U.S. side to record the dialogue between the leaders. That's according to people who had direct knowledge. There was a Russian translator there, and apparently the FT is learning from Russian sources that some of the things were discussed were Syria, policy in Ukraine, a number of foreign policy issues.
Well, I just answered my previous question, which is where does the president get intelligence and foreign policy advice from? Ostensibly from Vladimir Putin, who he's treating as his shadow national security advisor in this case. He's spending more time alone with him, talking about sensitive issues and getting insights from him and giving information to the Russian government that his team may not have than he may be spending with John Bolton or the intelligence chiefs. And what this tells us is that the president really does not engage in the most basic counterintelligence hygiene. This G20 meeting came well after the Helsinki summit when there was so much criticism about the president handing Vladimir Putin just manipulation points in terms of what the Russians knew and what the United States didn't know. He chose to make that same mistake again. We know that the president was the subject of a counterintelligence investigation a long time ago by the special counsel. We don't know if that investigation has concluded, but every time that he puts himself in these situations, it makes it so easy for Vladimir Putin to get more manipulation points on him that really adds fuel to the fodder and the conversation about whether there's just something he's trying to hide.
Phil, I want to ask you about that because this, oops, he's done it again. I mean, we don't know if this is a mistake or if this is by choice, because now it's Helsinki where this has happened, where the president met with Putin without a U.S. representative to record it. Hamburg, as we know, he took the interpreter's notes when the interpreter was there so that even his own advisors back at the White House don't know what was said. The files, even the classified files now, do not represent the details of what has been said in now these 3 different places, including Buenos Aires 2 months ago. So what are the manipulations? I mean, if only Putin and his interpreter know, what position does that put President Trump in?
Well, I think there's a couple of questions you'd have to ask of him. The first is, if he made a decision with Putin, who executes that decision? The president makes a decision. The Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, they execute. If they had a conversation, that is Putin and the president, about Syria, and they decided something, what happens? The second is, as Sam was pointing out, let's say Putin lays out what he's doing in Syria, and the facts that the intel guys have don't correspond with what Putin said. Who's going to tell the president, Mr. President, Putin just sold you a bill of goods. It's fake. What they're doing in Syria is different than what he said. Who gives the president the truth? There is one final question, Allison, that really disturbs me about this. I suspect that the president offered perspectives on what he was going to do in Syria to Putin, who's an adversary, before the president told allies like the Turks. That is, he told an enemy what we're doing in Syria before he told a friend. Not good business right there.
And remember, just a few weeks later, we changed our policy.
Yeah.
He said, we're getting out of Syria. And by all accounts, the defense secretary didn't know that we changed our policy. The intelligence community didn't know we changed our policy. But if they were talking about Syria, it appears that maybe Vladimir Putin not only knew about our new policy, but had a big influence.
Or suggested it.
Yes, or suggested it.
But bottom line is, we don't know.
We don't know.
Simply don't know because there was no other U.S. president.
And we should know. Yeah. So, I mean, I can make these statements that, Vladimir Putin's did, but we should know. The public should have the confidence that the entire apparatus of our government is working in the same direction, not at odds with the president.
Joe, Sam, Phil, thank you all very much. All right, Democrats throwing their names into the presidential race for 2020. So what can a candidate do to stand out from the pack? We have former Florida gubernatorial candidate Andrew Gillum joining us next.
All right, some really interesting new developments in the race for 2020. I think what we had overnight was the first sort of walk back or clarification from one of the main Democratic campaigns. Joining us now to discuss, our new CNN political commentator, Andrew Gillum. He's the former Democratic nominee for Florida governor and served as mayor of Tallahassee. Welcome to the family.
Thank you all for having me. It's been great so far. I'm glad I'm getting out of New York before it turns, 6 degrees or something.
Yeah, I mean, Florida is going to be better, I think
yeah,
we can
exactly.
safely say. Yeah.
Y'all are always welcome to do the show from there.
Thank you.
So there's been a really interesting substantive discussion about health care for the last few days. Medicare for all is something that many Democrats have called for some time. I believe it's something you have supported for some time. Senator Kamala Harris of California in the CNN town hall, which not for nothing was the most watched candidate town hall ever.
Wow.
She talked about Medicare for all, and when pushed by Jake Tapper, she said it would be okay if it meant the end of private insurance. Listen.
So for people out there who like their insurance, they don't get to keep it?
Well, listen, the idea is that everyone gets access to medical care. And you don't have to go through the process of going through an insurance company, having them give you approval, going through the paperwork, all of the delay that may require. Who of us has not had that situation where you got to wait for approval and the doctor says, well, I don't know if your insurance company is going to cover this? Let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on.
So eliminate all that, which is something that jumped out to a lot of people. Eliminate private insurance. Well, over the course of yesterday, her campaign made clear that, yes, she has supported measures that would do that, but she has also supported other measures that would not do away with private insurance. I call that a walk back or a clarification. But it's interesting. What political reality is she responding to there?
Well, I tell you, even in that clip, and I want to compliment the senator, obviously, for being willing to make an announcement and go straight into a televised, nationally televised forum where she would get real questions and have to go on the record on these kinds of issues. But what I heard in that clip really was a statement around a North Star of where she wants to go. I didn't hear a very concrete sort of set of steps on the way to getting there. There have been plenty of pieces of legislation that have been put forth in the Congress, and a number of them will take different approaches on the way to expanding access to health care, bringing down costs, and obviously dealing with this whole issue of affordability, even for those of us who have insurance. So what I would say is I think every Democratic contender for president of the United States, including on the Republican side, I must say, should offer a vision as to how it is that they're going to expand coverage and bring down costs in the process. I am an endorser of Medicare for all. When I ran for governor in the state of Florida, I talked about that, and I did it unapologetically. But when it came to the steps that I could take as governor of the state if I were to be elected, which obviously I subsequently was not, it would have been to expand Medicaid in our state to over 800,000 individuals, because we recognize that the step to getting toward Medicare for all is one that, quite frankly, is one that might be more gradual. And even Senator Sanders' legislation deals with the 39 million uninsured first, and then there's a rollout or a step toward getting to complete coverage.
On the bigger picture, excuse me, of the 2020 field, the fact that Senator Kamala Harris had the most watched town hall ever, okay, we're counting other networks, we're counting 2016. What does that tell you about the excitement around her?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of excitement around her. She was coming off of a very, very successful, I would say, launch over the weekend. But I will tell you, there's a lot of excitement for a lot of the contenders in the Democratic field. We will have the most diverse field of candidates running for president that this country has ever seen. I'm good friends with Secretary Castro, who also produced a really, really, I think, attended announcement. What I'm hoping for, however, is that the candidates will use these first several months. I think we have our first debate on the Democratic side maybe in June of this year. But they ought to use this as an opportunity to cast big vision, talk to the American people about where it is that they want to take this country. I don't think we ought to spend a whole bunch of time relitigating the past. I think this is about, as is all elections, about the future and where we want to go. Ultimately, I think if the person who will win not only the Democratic primary, but the White House will be the person who, in my opinion, is able to reach some of those Trump voters. And I don't mean those who might self-identify as racist, but I mean those individuals who believed that, quite frankly, they were getting a raw deal, that the economy wasn't working for them, that they want better opportunities for themselves and their families. They didn't feel that. The president somehow was able to convince them that we were going to win again. But what he didn't communicate is that he was going to win again. The rest of us were going to suffer. And I believe the Democratic nominee, and whoever will become the president, will be the one who's able to cast a bigger, broader, more aspirational vision for where we want to take this country.
How should, in your mind, Democrats walk the line between progressive candidacies or more centrist candidacies? You know, Howard Schultz, and there are some people who say that he's getting more attention than perhaps he deserves right now, but he has drawn a contrast with himself, what he calls centrist policies, moderate policies, where he feels most of America is, and the Democratic Party, which he says has left him and moved too far to the left. Is that something that Democrats who are running need to be aware of?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know Mr. Schultz. I understand he's been a lifelong Democrat. I will tell you, as a lifelong Democrat, I would welcome him back into the Democratic Party and in the Democratic fold. There are a number of candidates who have staked out more progressive positions in this primary. If he believes that there is room for his vision, if he believes that whatever his version of a moderate vision for the future of the country is the right way to go, I think he ought to make that case inside the Democratic primary. I don't think that it is helpful, not to him and certainly not to the country, and not to those of us who want to replace Donald Trump in the White House, for him to, quite frankly, skirt that process, use his billions to run an independent and I believe likely failing race for president, which would, I believe, almost ultimately guarantee Donald Trump's reelection. If there are enough people, if you're just doing the math, if everybody is carving out a space on the progressive side, then don't you think in the process of elimination, if you took a different route and there's a constituency for it, you ought to go out and make the case? He may not get my vote, but I do believe that if he believes that the constituency on the Democratic side for that message, he ought to take the opportunity to get out there and explain it. What I don't agree with is I don't think you can sit back in the cheap seats and basically complain about everybody else's policy proposals without offering your own vision for where you want to take the country.
Like we do. Mayor Andrew Gillum, welcome to the CNN family. Great to have you. Great to have your voice with us.
Look forward to seeing you again. Remember, New Day is the most important show here.
There it is.
As part of your new family.
All right, a bipartisan group of lawmakers will meet today to prevent, or try to, another shutdown. Is there any hope that negotiations will work this time? That's next.
This is CNN Breaking News.
All right, a bipartisan group of lawmakers will meet today to discuss border security proposals in the hope of preventing another shutdown. Some of the most powerful Democrats are sending a message to the president before these negotiations even begin.
I think we can find bipartisan answers to most of the issues involving border security. But if the president has the last word, it may not be enough.
When the president stays out of the negotiations, we almost always succeed. When he mixes in, it's a formula for failure. So I'd ask President Trump, let Congress deal with it on its own.
All right, joining us now is Seung-Min Kim, White House reporter for The Washington Post and CNN political analyst, and Chris Cillizza, CNN politics and reporter and editor at large. Great to have both of you. It's deja vu all over again, Seung-Min. What is going to change in the negotiations this time around?
Well, if you're looking at kind of the baselines of where the sides are, not much. But what is different this time is that you do have this group of 17 lawmakers tasked with trying to find a deal. And we'll see how empowered they are at the end of the day to reach an agreement on border security. A lot of times these conference committees in Congress, everything gets punted up to leadership and they're really the ones who figure it out. But if you look at the makeup of these 17 lawmakers from the House and the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, these aren't, fire-breathing partisans. They are deal makers. They are pragmatic. If you talk appropriators, the lawmakers who figure out the funding details for the federal government are among the most likely on Capitol Hill to make a deal. But the equation here, but the wild card in the equation here is Donald Trump and whether he would be willing to accept a deal that these members come up with, we'll start to see signs of where the fault lines are later today at their first public meeting. But again, the question is what the president's red lines are and what he's willing to support.
And he just let us know on day 5 of his relative seclusion. He said no public events now. Today is day 5 of that. Chris Cillizza, he just wrote, if the committee of Republicans and Democrats now meeting on border security is not discussing or contemplating a wall or physical barrier, they are wasting their time. Does he have the juice to move this discussion at this point?
I guess we'll see. Here's a problem, John, is that there's a difference between a wall and some sort of physical barrier, money to repair the physical barrier that's already there, right? There's nuance in this that breaking news gets lost on Donald Trump's Twitter feed. I'm very skeptical, for the reason Sungmin just laid out. I'm very skeptical that you see anything beyond the narrowest of deals emerge out of this group tasked with trying to cut a deal. Because the larger it gets, DACA, permanent DACA, anything like that, it just, I think, you start losing people. People start stripping away from it. And again, Donald Trump, who knows? Some days it sounds like he's okay if there's just money to repair what's there and maybe build some. Some days he wants a wall from sea to shining sea. I still think the ultimate outcome here, most likely outcome, is that a deal is crafted he does not like or he signals Republicans not to sign onto, and he eventually declares a national emergency. I don't think the government shuts down again because then it's broadly seen as catastrophic for him and his party, but I also don't see anything that's fundamentally changed in the fault lines of where we got the shutdown from.
Yeah, Sungmin, just to put a finer point on this, how crazy this is outside the Beltway. Outside the Beltway, what it sounds like is the president has worked his way from 1,000 miles, sea to shining sea, to 234 miles. He's worked his way from a 30-foot cement wall to slats or a barrier of some kind. And Democrats have worked their way from 0 to $5.7 billion, which is what the president wanted for something, for some sort of border security. And so the idea that they can't close this deal is a shocker.
It could be, but I think that's why you've seen, especially before the first meetings start later today, that Democrats have been careful to not draw too many red lines in their negotiations. And if you look at some people on that committee, look, Jon Tester is a moderate from Montana. I mean, he's also technically a border state politician, just on a different border, and he's been willing to entertain the idea of barriers or fencing and whatnot. And I think what we saw in the shutdown is that while, leaders in the party like Nancy Pelosi do have firm lines in terms of the wall and wall funding, their first focus was that you can't negotiate on this while the government is shut down. And also going back to something that Chris mentioned earlier about a potential broader deal with DACA and all those things thrown in, the president indicated in a private lunch that he had with David Perdue, a Republican senator from Georgia, a lunch that was not advised on his public schedule, I will add, over the weekend, that he understands that it is best to go kind of as simple as possible and to be focused. Now, that may change in the next week or so, but I think the goal right now is just to get the job done immediately at hand.
So, Chris, a couple developments in the Democratic race for president. Eric Garcetti, the mayor of Los Angeles, announced last night he is not running, which was interesting because, look, I don't know if he was going to win, but there were people who were captivated by him in their own ways. Another development was what I noted before as sort of the first clarification from one of the main campaigns, Kamala Harris, senator from California, clarifying her stance on Medicare for all. Are these connected, by the way? Is Garcetti not getting in because Harris looks strong at this point? Why is Harris clarifying?
Well, let me take Garcetti first. He was asked whether Harris's announcement and the positive press that she got for her rollout had anything to do with his decision. He said it had zero to do with it. I don't think it had zero to do with it. I don't think it made his decision. But look, Kamala Harris is going to hoover up a lot of the money activist buzz in California. It's a huge state. Obviously, you can have several candidates, particularly because she's from San Francisco Bay Area. He's from L.A. But I do think it made something of a difference. On Harris, Medicare for all. Here's what they would argue. Well, she is for her preferred way forward on healthcare is single payer Medicare for all. That said, she's going to be for anything, including bills she sponsored in the Senate, or co-sponsored, that get you closer to it. It's a nuanced position that, candidly, in my opinion, she didn't really take with Jake during that town hall. So I think they are clarifying it. I don't think this is a flip-flop, but it does show that in a town hall public setting, you got to be very careful. When you say, let's eliminate all of it, people are going to draw some conclusions about what that means.
All right, Chris Cillizza, Seungmin Kim, thank you both very much. So there's this polar plunge that has left most of the country in a very deep freeze this morning and led the president to ruminate about what he calls climate change, I guess, or maybe global warming. So we have a needed CNN reality check. It's very hot. Chicago police and the FBI are investigating a possible hate crime after Empire actor Jussie Smollett says he was physically attacked by two men that he claims shouted racial and homophobic slurs. CNN's Sarah Seidner is live in Los Angeles with more. What do we know, Sarah?
This has caught the attention of a lot of people, from A-listers to, political heavyweights. We know this morning that police and the FBI are asking for the public's help because they are looking through dozens and dozens of hours of video, but they can't seem to find any evidence of the attackers in this case. Actor and singer Jussie Smollett is best known for his role in the television series Empire, where he plays Jamal, a black singer who is gay. Chase the kind of song that makes a man love a man. Smollett is also black and gay, which may have been the motivation for an alleged attack against him in Chicago. Police say they are investigating a possible hate crime against the actor with the help of the FBI. Authorities say the Empire actor reported that the crime happened at about 2 a.m. Tuesday, when two men got his attention by yelling out racial and homophobic slurs. Smollett told police the men then began hitting him in the face and poured an unknown chemical substance on him, adding that at some point during the incident, one of the offenders wrapped a rope around his neck. During a follow-up interview, police say Smollett told them something new, that during the attack, the offenders uttered, "This is MAGA country." Overnight, police announcing they are expanding the search area for surveillance video of the alleged attackers, because so far, in a place with a high number of private surveillance cameras, they cannot find any images of the two alleged attackers. After combing through hundreds of hours of videos, the only image of Smollett police obtained from security cameras was inside the Subway sandwich shop near the location of the reported crime, and he was standing alone. Empire director Lee Daniels taking to social media to voice his support for Smollett.
You didn't deserve, nor anybody deserves, to have a noose put around your neck, to have bleach thrown on you, to be called die, faggot, nigger, or whatever they said to you. We are better than that. America is better than that.
Support for Smollett exploding online, from Hollywood A-listers to political heavyweights. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi tweeting the racist, homophobic attack on Jussie Smollett is an affront to our humanity. No one should be attacked for who they are or whom they love. Democratic presidential candidate and Senator Kamala Harris also weighing in, calling Smollett one of the kindest, most gentle human beings I know, and calling the attack an attempted modern-day lynching. And there are many, many more people, both famous and people who are just fans, who have come out in support of Smollett. Though we have not heard from Smollett himself, we did hear from his publicist. He has not been speaking publicly about this or going on social media talking about this after the attack. However, his publicist said that he was recovering and out of the hospital.
All right, Sarah Seidner for us. We know you're going to stay on this. Thanks so much. Yeah. The record-breaking polar plunge already being blamed for at least 5 deaths, and the worst of it isn't even here yet. And speaking of the worst of it, President Trump is using the Arctic blast as an opportunity to get a little cute about climate change. John Avlon joins us with a reality check, sir.
That's right, guys. Look, Chicago is going to be as cold as Antarctica today, and over in Minnesota, it's even worse, with a wind chill that's flirting with 70 below. In fact, 3/4 of us are going to see temperatures drop below zero, and from North Dakota to Long Island, folks are expected to feel some of the coldest weather ever on record. Now, normally this kind of weather emergency, we can count on the President of the United States to speak words of wisdom. This one, not so much. Quote, What the hell's going on with global whamming? Please come back fast. We need you. Okay, if you thought it was bad when Trump joked about hacking Hillary's emails, here he is joking about a gathering global catastrophe. And what's worse, the president of the United States is once again confusing climate with weather. It's like an endless debate you have with an out-of-touch uncle. So, one more time. Climate and weather are different things. Weather's what's happening today. Climate is about broader trends, like the fact that the past 4 years were the warmest on record. Climate causes oceans to rise and coral reefs to die. Catastrophic polar ice retreat and flooding from New York to Miami Beach. It's that thing that every responsible scientist agrees is man-made and irreversible unless we act basically yesterday, something President Trump has steadfastly refused to do, courting the very harsh judgment of history. But if Trump won't put any credence in climate change, then thank goodness the government does, because hours after the president was being sarcastic on Twitter, the intelligence community was being deadly serious in an official report. They warned of, quote, the impact of global human security challenges, such as threats to public health, historic levels of human displacement, and the negative effects of environmental degradation and climate change. Climate change could also cause, quote, competition for resources, economic distress, and social discontent through 2019 and beyond. Got that? That's 2019 as in right now. This isn't some future tense dystopian fantasy. And that's not all. A brand new study from the American Heart Association says a warming climate raises the chances of a baby being born with a congenital heart defect, while another study says it can even affect the gender balance of newborns, with fewer girls born in places with rising temperatures. But the Trump administration has been feeling the opposite of urgency. For example, releasing a report recommending no tightening of tailpipe emissions, arguing basically, we can't fix it, so why bother? Look, the weather outside is frightful. And if your radio station is still allowed to play Baby It's Cold Outside, this is a good day for it. Get ready for a festival of denial. The president trolling environmentalists on Twitter, climate change deniers building igloos, and lawmakers even carrying snowballs into the halls of Congress. All stunts we've seen before. But don't buy it. If you won't listen to the environmentalists or the scientists, how about the intelligence community? And that's your reality check.
The intelligence community part of it is so interesting, John, and for so long they've been crystal clear. You don't see it every day, but one of their big fears around the world has been climate change. They take it very seriously.
It's one more example. The experts disagree with the president.
John, again, I feel this one is evergreen. You could do it every single week, and I feel like you do. And I think that it bears repeating what's going on with the climate. Thank you very much. All right, he was the ghostwriter of President Trump's book, The Art of the Deal. He's here to tell us why President Trump has retreated inside the White House in the days since the shutdown.